Hey there, I'm Chris Martin for Lifeway Social, and this week we're going to talk about social media stats and what's important to pay attention to, what's not important to pay attention to. Well, not so much that as what's the most important thing to pay attention to. I've been in a lot of discussions recently about what is the most valuable kind of engagement on social media, and it's a good discussion. It's an important discussion. Different campaigns, different strategies you're deploying at different times are going to have different goals. Sometimes you're going to be most concerned about social media driving revenue to a site. If you're trying to sell something, you might be most concerned about revenue. Sometimes you're just going to be caring about how much people see something. Other times you might be interested in how they're engaging, or, there are all kinds of goals you can have when you're talking about social media strategy. And that really does, I'm going to give you some tips and stuff here, but really what it comes down to is what your goal is. I can give you kind of my opinion and what I think is most important when talking about, a brand awareness play or things like that. But a lot of it just goes back to what your goals are for what you're trying to do. So the question I asked this week in my weekly blog post on Lifeway Social is, what's more important, engagement or impressions? So let's put aside revenue for a second. Let's not talk about social campaigns that are intended to generate revenue, because they're kind of their own beast. They kind of they're special. Not most of your social campaigns probably aren't designed to generate revenue. If you're watching this video and you're part of Lifeway Social, most of your social media strategies are probably centered around brand awareness or engaging with your audience. And so what you should be asking yourself is, are you more concerned about people seeing your content or engaging with your content? So impressions on Facebook would be reach. It would be, really, generally speaking, impressions is the number of eyeballs that see your content. It's literally what it sounds like. It's impressions, not are you impressive, but have people seen your content, the reach. That's impressions. Engagement is people who have taken an action to show some kind of interest, good or bad, in your content. So engagement would be a like, a comment, a share, a click, a video view, something like that. And so there are all different kinds of engagement and impressions. And there's a case to be made that both are worth looking at. Some people have said that impressions are most important because you can't have engagements without impressions. That's a good point. That's a really good point. Some people have said impressions are important because they're easier to get and it's an easier metric to track. That's also true. Some people like to track impressions because there are more impressions than engagement, always. And the logic kind of follows that. We'll talk about that in a second. So there's a case to be made for impressions being most important, being the reach being the number that you track. I understand that. That's not where I would tend to stand, though. I actually think engagement is more important than impressions. And here's why. Impressions just mean someone has seen your content. Doesn't mean anyone's interested in your content. Doesn't mean anyone wants to engage with your content. Impressions simply means they saw it. They may have forgotten it. They may have not really even seen it, just scrolled by it, something like that. And the reason I think the case is stronger that engagement is a more important metric than impressions is because engagement is just a higher quality metric. It shows more about who you're trying to reach than a simple impression. Impressions can be impressive. The numbers of impressions can be astronomical. But if you reach 3,000 people and only 3 people engage the content, it says a lot about your content. If you reach 3,000 people and 1,000 people engage with your content, that's incredible. That's great. And I'm talking like Facebook especially. That's fantastic. And so really, kind of my definition of the most important metric to track on social media when you're not talking about revenue generating social media strategy, but more of an awareness strategy, is actually engagement rate. So I think the quality of your content is best measured by engagement rate, which maybe I need to write a separate blog post about this, but engagement rate is quite simply the number of people who engaged with your piece of content divided by the total number of people that piece of content reached. That means that just shows you what percentage of people you reached were compelled enough to engage. And I think that can give you a good barometer of how well a particular piece of social media content did, and how interesting it was to your audience. So that's my take. You can read the blog post on the Lifeway Social blog. I'll link it in the description of this YouTube video. Have a great rest of your day, and I will talk to you again soon.